Just hit the record button. So you had a conversation in your breakout rooms around the cultural bomb, how the cultural bomb relates to code switching, and then you also should have discussed the homework assignment that I provided you guys last week on to not code switch. So who wants to share what was discussed in your breakout rooms? So Jasmine, what did you guys talk about in your breakout rooms? Jasmine, we're waiting on you.
We didn't really talk. We were
So what were you doing in your breakout rooms if you didn't talk?
just going over like our point of view, but we didn't really talk, and we're trying to figure out our answers.
Okay. Who was in your breakout room with you?
I believe it was Destiny, and I'm not sure who else.
So I'm kind of confused. What did you guys talk about again? If you didn't talk about the questions that were posed, what were you discussing?
We were trying to figure out the answers.
Okay.
Like, yeah, we're thinking more in depth of what we wanted to say.
We were just a little bit confused about the cultural bomb, so we were just discussing that and then trying to find examples in the text.
Of the cultural bomb?
Yeah.
Can anybody else help them out with the cultural bomb? Because he lays out a pretty clear example of what the cultural bomb is. Everyone was confused about the cultural bomb? Arturo, what did you guys discuss in your group?
Oh, we had like a similar, conversation. Like we didn't really understand the cultural bond ourselves too.
Okay. Did y'all read the book or the passages?
Yeah, but like we said, we didn't really like discuss much about it because we didn't like get really into depth about the topic about it.
Okay.
Can I try and define it?
Yeah, please, Juan, go ahead.
So I would explain it as someone who, from a certain culture, when they try to distance themselves from that culture and assimilate to the social norm of their new environment.
Yeah, you're right in a roundabout way, but Ngūgī gives us very specific definitions of what the cultural bomb is and what it does.
Well, he explained it as like annihilating your culture with
Absolutely.
their language, beliefs, names.
Yep, exactly. So the cultural bomb, when there's two opposing cultures at play, if you think about what we read last week with Somé, right? We have the two opposing cultures of the white Western world and the indigenous African world, right? What the cultural bomb does, it makes you take a disavow to your original culture, to your native culture. So let's pivot. Let's talk about the third point of conversation that you should have been discussing in your breakout rooms. Or I'll pose it to you this way. You had the homework assignment over the weekend to not code switch when you normally code switch. I'm curious, for those who did the assignment, what was your experience with the assignment? Faith, did you get a chance to do the homework assignment for the week?
No, I didn't.
Destiny, did you get a chance to do your assignment for the week?
No, mister. I tried to read it over the weekend, but I didn't get time.
Okay. What about the code switching assignment? Did you get a chance to do that?
Yeah, I was trying to talk to it over in my group at the breakout with Ashlyn and Jasmine, and me and Ashlyn we were trying to figure out code switching, and I gave my purpose of what was it and identified and gave an example.
Okay. Did you? Because we had an assignment, and your assignment was if you normally code switch, don't do that, and we're supposed to talk about it today. Did you what? So what did you do not to code switch? Put it that
Basically, I give an like not explaining so much, like in other words, like explaining so much, but like and like in just full on sentence, but yeah.
Okay. Marjorie, did you do the code switch assignment?
I did. I actually found it a little difficult
Okay.
because um, usually I do that a lot. So it was a little difficult. It was fun to try
So
to keep myself from. Yeah.
so explain to us, Marjorie, like where, like what's the setting that you chose not to code switch at?
Um, I think I have a harder time doing it when I'm trying to explain something to or some or like I'm trying to bring the point across, but I usually will code switch to be able to do that, and I was trying so hard not to do it, but I ended up doing it. So
So for your code switch, Marjorie, is it like a language thing, so where you're code switching between Spanish and English? Like what is the code switch that you're trying not to do?
it's like the language.
Okay.
Yeah, because usually my family they speak just one language, and I'll have to try and explain things to them in that language, but at the same time it's easier for me to understand in the other language, and yeah.
I got you. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Kevin, were you able to do the code switching assignment over the weekend?
I'm gonna be straight up. I missed class like 3 weeks, so I'm confused on everything.
No worries. Visit the recorded lectures. That way it'll allow you to get caught up. Arturo, were you able to do the code switching assignment over the week?
Last week I wasn't able to attend the class last week, but I did do the journals for last week and this week. But I didn't do that one.
So just for Kevin and Arturo, because I still encourage you guys to try to do the assignment. It's more of a social experiment than an assignment. Both of you, do you understand what it is to code switch? Does that make sense to you, or do you want me to explain that to you a little bit more?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, I get it.
Okay. So the assignment is simple. Wherever you normally code switch, don't do it, and then see how that makes you feel. And then also be attentive or see how people around you respond to you not code switching. Okay, that's simple assignment. That's all I'm asking you to do. When you normally code switch, don't. But I do say don't get fired, right? Don't do nothing to get your ass kicked. Be careful in the way that you go about doing the code switch. But I want you to kind of push up against these normative borders. Okay.
Got it.
Okay. Juan, were you able to do the assignment this weekend?
Yeah, I did try. I couldn't really find much to change, but I did see that when I would talk to people not from my culture, I would like just try and go with the flow. So I would just like not correct, for example, not correct them on how the pronunciation of my name is, how it's meant to be. So I would just let them say it wrong, just so I wouldn't like, I guess, interfere with the conversation, or it wouldn't be awkward. But I did correct someone and say it was Juan, like like the pronunciation is with an H and not a W. So yeah, I did do that.
How was it? How was that experience for you?
It was not bad at all. They correctly said my name after that, and yeah, nothing much more came out of it.
Yeah, and you know,
or came about from it.
Okay, and I'm gonna try to say it right. Juan, is that correct? Juan,
yes.
So that is extremely important, and that's one way that we code switch that we don't often think about. Not correcting people when they mispronounce their names, right? Because, and if you think about to last week's reading, how important someone's name becomes, you don't want somebody to fuck up your destiny by saying your name wrong, right? So I think that's a great example of bringing your full self into a conversation, something as simple as how to pronounce your name. So I think that was a great example. Miguel, were you able to do the assignment?
Yes, I was.
So what was your experience, Miguel?
My experience was code switching in public from Spanish to English.
Okay.
When I went out with a friend, and we would normally speak Spanish when there weren't people around. And when there was a good amount of people around, we would switch to English. Or if we were confident enough to speak Spanish, we would talk very quietly, so like people wouldn't hear us. But this time I was just speaking Spanish as I normally would, like at home, like not loud, but like in a normal tone.
Yeah. How did people respond around you?
No one cared. No one cared.
Yeah, and so I think that's really interesting because, like, how we police ourselves, and we're policing ourselves, and people around us are really tripping, right? So we've done the job of colonizing ourselves to make other people, because we think it will make other people feel comfortable, and they're not even concerned with what you do, right? So that's something to think about as well. Ashlyn, were you able to do the assignment?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. What was your experience?
I've pretty much just tried to like, because there was an event, so we were meeting different people and stuff. So it's kind of similar to like the first, like introducing your name and things. And then just like, usually when I meet people, my voice gets a lot higher, or like I put on a different impression. So I was just trying to be more genuine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did that feel for you, Ashlyn?
I think it was nice because then I knew that like the people that I actually did connect with, it was like I could already connect to them based off of like who I was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Jasmine, were you able to do the assignment?
No, I actually didn't get the chance to.
Okay. No worries. So I do encourage for those of you who did not get to do it, right? Like, there's one thing to do homework to get a grade, right? Like that's one way to go about homework. But things like this is a little bit more generative because it kind of gets you to understand a deeper version of yourself. And it gets you to contemplate how you present yourself in the world. So I think this is a lot more personally beneficial than just your normal homework assignment to get points, right? So I do encourage you guys to continue to do the assignment. So go ahead.
Also, I know you were asking about code switching. So I think over the weekend I did it. My experience. Can I say my
Please.
experience?
Please.
Okay. Well, my experience. I was at a family gathering, and for me it was kind of awkward and kind of like weird because like my family speaks Spanish, and so for that I had to like I always speak Spanish to all my family and everything, but at our family gathering we all had to speak Spanish, so I had to speak Spanish to stop for my English, so they won't know like, oh, okay, like you're speaking English, like we got you speaking English, but again like it felt kind of awkward because like I will never speak that much Spanish like in my entire life. So people like were looking at me like saying, oh, okay, like they thought like, oh, this white person like talking all Spanish and talks English too, but it kind of like it was kind of weird to me. So that's what I felt cool about code switching during my experience.
Okay. Thank you for sharing, Destiny. So what we'll do is we'll transition into my notes about the readings. So the book that the excerpt was pulled from is called Decolonizing the Mind, The Politics of Language in African Literature by Ngūgī wa Thiong'o. And Ngūgī wa Thiong'o is a professor of literature at UC Irvine. So he's very accessible, like Karengo, an individual who you can kind of like reach out, shoot an email, and he'll correspond back with you. In the books, what he calls a statement, right? He makes this claim and he states, this book, Decolonizing the Mind, is my farewell to English as a vehicle for any of my writings. From now on, it is Kikuyu and Kiswahili all the way, right? So for me, this is Ngūgī saying, I'm no longer code switching, right? It's my FU to the English language. I'm strictly writing in my native tongue, which is either Kikuyu or Kiswahili, right? And in the actual introduction, he wants to challenge this idea or this notion that all African experiences or happenings are due to tribalism, right? So any event that happens in Uganda, in Malawi, in Zimbabwe, Ghana, etc., if it's a war because two tribes are beefing, right? So anything that happens in Africa is always because of tribal issues. And he says that's not the case, and we need to move beyond that as African intellectuals, because what that does, it allows imperialism, colonialism to be effaced. It can kind of play the background because everybody's paying attention to the tribal wars opposed to the colonial powers who set these tribes in place, right? And then he goes into the cultural bomb. And I think Juan gave us the most concise explanation of what the cultural bomb is. And I'll read to you the passage where we got the cultural bomb from. This is on the page 3, the first full paragraph. And it starts with, the oppressed and the exploited of the earth maintain their defiance. Liberty from theft. But the biggest weapon wielded and actually daily unleashed by imperialism against that collective defiance is the cultural bomb. The effect of a cultural bomb is to annihilate a people's belief in their names, in their language, and in their environment, in their heritage of struggle, in their unity, in their capacities, and ultimately in themselves, right? So that's what the cultural bomb does. It causes you to devalue who you are, right? It causes you to devalue your indigenousness. It causes you to devalue your Africanity, right? So how that relates to code switching. So a lot of you said, you know, I code switch by speaking Spanish in a certain space, right? So how that relates to the cultural bomb. Because before you decided not to code switch, you wouldn't speak Spanish in that space because you felt like that language would not be validated or appreciated in that area, right? So therefore, you are in effect annihilating your belief in your own language, right? Because you don't believe that in this particular space, it will be accepted, right? And I think it was Miguel who said he tried to speak Spanish in a space where he normally just speaks English and no one cared, right? So again, what the cultural bomb does, it's not about how white folks view you. That's not what the cultural bomb is concerned with. It is concerned with how you view your own culture. And what it does, it makes you devalue your own culture, right? So if you have an ethnic sounding name, right, you want to just use the more English version of the name just because everybody else was comfortable with that. And I think Juan gave us a great example of that in the pronunciation of his name and correcting it to make sure that that's pronounced the correct way, right? So this is what the work that the cultural bomb does. And then he also goes on to say that the choice of language for a people is central to their definition of themselves and in relation to their relation to the natural and social environments, right? So, and if you think about last week, right, he says that language will dictate the way that you understand your reality, right? And then Ngūgī's saying the same thing in a roundabout way. He's just saying that your choice of language is central to a people's definition of themselves in relation to their natural and social environment. So how you understand your relation to your social environment and your natural environment is predicated on language. Then he goes into this, in the actual chapter, he goes into this musings on the contradictions of the Conference of African Writers of the English Expression, right? And he highlights that one of the contradictions is him as a student who has minimal publications. He has, if he says 2 short stories in small publications. He's able to attend the conference, but the most widely recognized and widely popular poet of his generation in his era is not able to attend the conference because he does not write in English. He chooses to write in Swahili or Kikuyu, right? He mentions another Nigerian poet who is widely recognized who cannot attend the conference because he refuses to write in English as well. So he says there's a contradiction that someone who is not as well widely recognized as these 2 poets who I named off, I'm able to attend the conference because I write in English when these 2 great poets can't attend the conference only because they don't write in English, right? So that would be the equivalent of Destiny being able to attend a conference as a student, right? Because she writes in English, and me as your professor, I can't attend the conference because I write in Swahili, right? He said there's a contradiction at play. And then this notion of us as African writers writing an expression or in a language that is of our oppressors, right? And it causes them to pose the question, what is African literature? Is it literature written in the African language? Is it literature about African experiences? Is it African people producing literature? But what he says is the conference failed to address the fundamental issue of African people making artistic expression in the language of their oppressor. And then he poses this question that's in line with the contradiction that he finds within the conference. He asks, how do we, as African writers, come to be so feeble towards the claims of our own language on us, and so aggressive in our claims on other languages, particularly the languages of our colonization, right? So we're quick to defend the language of our oppressor, but we won't defend our native language. How do we get to this point, right? And remember when I talk about the type of questions that you could pose, questions for understanding, questions that produce research, questions for critique. This question that Ngūgī poses does the two latter things, right? So he could literally write a whole nother book about this notion of African writers being feeble in defending their native language, right? That could be a whole nother book if he so choose. But he's also critiquing the fact that African writers only use English language, right? So I bring this up to get you guys to start expanding your idea of a question. And I really like the way that he ends the passage. He says, the bullet was the means of physical subjugation. Language was the means of spiritual subjugation. I'm going to read to you the whole passage. I'm going to ask you, what does that mean? So he says, in my view, language was the most important vehicle through which that power fascinated and held the soul prisoner. The bullet was the means of physical subjugation. Language was the means of spiritual subjugation. So what does it mean when Ngūgī says that the bullet was the means of physical subjugation and language was the means of spiritual subjugation? What does that mean? So let me ask you this. What does subjugation mean? What does it mean to be subjugated? Ashley, can you say that out loud, please?
It means like to be put under control.
Absolutely. So if we know that subjugation means to be controlled, to be colonized, right? So what Kevin is saying in the chat is dominating your spirit. Yeah, I would agree with that, right? It's putting your spirit under control. And then think about the visual of that metaphor, right? What does a bullet do? It tears through flesh. It tears through bones, right? The gun wins wars, right? The gun is how nations conquer other nations, right? So he says the same work that the bullet does to the body, language does to the soul. So if you think back to last week, and I mentioned that the missions that we all had to learn about in the 4th grade, and I said that the missions are the equivalent for indigenous people to what the plantation was for African people, right? And when you spoke your native language in these missions, you would be viciously beaten till they beat that native language out of you, right? So that's that subjugation of the soul that Ngūgī is speaking towards. So those are my notes for today. We'll transition into our fishbowl. Remember, for your fishbowl, you could read from your journal. You could talk about what was mentioned in the breakout rooms, or you could even pull from my notes. Is there anyone who wants to volunteer for the fishbowl? All right, so I'll I'm sorry, Marjorie, I got you. Thank you. Anybody else want to volunteer? All right, so I'll call at random. Jasmine, are you prepared to fishbowl today?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Jasmine. We'll get one more. Juan, are you prepared to fishbowl today?
I can, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So Marjorie, Jasmine, and Juan, if you guys have fishbowled already, then this would be your second, and you guys will be good for the semester. And if I do call you again, just let me know that I've already went twice, and you have a pass. So whoever wants to set it off, it's on you.
So from our breakout room, mostly about the cultural bomb.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that the whole annihilating the language and the name, it happens like even nowadays, and it's a little sorry, just it's disturbing, and um it's sad to see this still happening to some people, and even like to me, I guess it's happened a lot. uh I like the way that uh he specified and gave details. I read it a couple of times to understand better, and I don't know, I just really like that part of the text a lot.
Yeah, I agree, Marjorie. I agree. Thank you. Who's next?
I would say going back to the code switching, that it's used very often nowadays as well, with like the way people speak at home and then the way people speak out like when they're out in public, and how like they're very formal out in public, and when at home they're just in their natural habitat, not really minding what they're saying, and how they're being heard or interpreted. Yeah.
For me, I'd like to go back to the questions we were faced with earlier today. I think that the cultural bomb and code switching are similar because it's almost like you're embarrassed of your culture, your background, and you're changing yourself for others in a way where you think that it's helping yourself and others, but it's really just um, deteriorating your culture. And I found my favorite quote from this reading was when he said, or is it a he?
It's he, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's he. He said, "Is it right that a man should abandon his mother tongue for someone else's? It looks like a dreadful betrayal and produces a guilty feeling, but for me, there is no other choice. I have been given the language, and I intend to use it." So, and I think that it takes a lot to do that, because you'll be faced with a lot of judgment, and for you to take that on, I think takes a lot of bravery. And because sometimes it's hard for me as well, and sometimes I fall under the pressure, but I would like to do what he's doing.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
Yeah, that was a great fishbowl. I appreciate each of you. I'm going to kind of pivot our conversations. Of course, it's aligned with what we've been discussing, but I just kind of approach it from a different way. So a lot of time for the past 2 weeks, we've been discussing like why we code switch, what code switch looks and feels like. And I gave you the assignment to not do that, right? But like, let's kind of spend some time on the alternative, right, of not code switching and what that looks like when your culture is validated and appreciated. As I mentioned before, I look at Ebonics, or what they call AAV, African American Vernacular English, as a secondary language, right? And I also argue that Black folks, we often code switch between Ebonics and standard vernacular English, right? In the 90s, in Oakland, there was a movement that took place to recognize Ebonics as an actual language. Is anybody familiar with the Oakland area or the Bay Area? Have family up there or visited up there or anything like that? No? So in Oakland, they have a very specified dialect. They have a very specified accent. Like I could be in a room of 50 folks and I know automatically when somebody's from Oakland. For example, I went to, for a semester, I went to a HBCU in Tennessee. And an HBCU is a historically black college or university. Typically what you find at HBCUs, people from all over the country merge in these at this university. And out of all the black folks on campus, right, when I heard somebody from Oakland, I already knew without even asking them where you're from that they were from Oakland because of the dialect that they possess. I believe in large part this dialect that you hear from folks from Oakland is due to the work that was done in the 90s that accepted Ebonics as a secondary language, right? So if you went to class speaking Ebonics, you weren't be reprimanded for it. That would be authenticated and validated, right? And so what I find with people from Oakland who are my age, very rarely do they linguistically code switch. So for those who are familiar with sports, you could think of a Marshawn Lynch, right? If you hear him in an interview, you don't hear him code switching. In the entertainment world, I think of Ryan Coogler, right? The director of Black Panther, I believe also the Creed movies. If you hear him in an interview, there's no code switching with him also. And I believe that's due to the fact that they both came from an environment that supports and validates Ebonics, right? So what I want to do is show you a quick 5-minute video of an interview with Ryan Coogler so you can kind of hear that Oakland dialect. And then also the conversation that he has is really fecund for discussion for our course. So we'll take about 5 minutes or so to watch that real quick and we'll engage in conversation. Can you guys see this? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
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 Yes. Cool. Thank you.
Black identity. And this relationship between African Americans and Africans on the continent. Can you talk about what your relationship with the continent has been and, you know, what you see as the reconciliation between Africans and African Americans?
I mean, that's heavy, man. Like, I remember having a conversation about my own identity when I was very young, man. My parents had to sit me down and have a, you know, your black conversation. You know what I mean? And I think that it's a conversation that parents have to have in this country, and I think all over the world. You know, because it's a real thing. If you don't understand, not the fact that your skin looks like this, you know, but if you don't understand the fact that the world is going to treat you a certain way because of that, and you have to be ready for that. You know, it could cost you your life if your parents don't have that conversation with you. You know, so I had that conversation at an early age, and what I found was, you know, I was a curious kid, and you know, so it's like, you know, you're African American, and I was big on why, like, what does that mean? You know what I mean? And so we come from the continent of Africa. We come from this place that you see on the map in school, and that you see, you know, on the globe at home. You know, but I was in the Bay Area. I was as far away from the continent as you could be, you know, and still find black people. You know what I mean? Like, next thing you hit is Hawaii, I guess. You know what I mean? And, you know, I had a lot of pain inside of me due to not being able to, you know my ancestry and only being able to access that wound. And what we were taught, not to be long-winded, you know, but what we kind of taught about our own African American culture is that it's a bastardized culture. We taught that, you know, we lost, you know, the things that made us African. We don't have them anymore. You know what I mean? Like we had to make do with the scraps. And when I sat down with Marvel and said, hey, yo, for me to write this script, I need to go to the continent. I need to go like right now. You know, they were like, man, you know, go. And I went and started in South Africa because, you know, it was really because Chadwick and Civil War and Dr. John Conley, they speak Xhosa, the dialect on the continent. And I went, you know, I started there. I started there, and what I found was you know what I found as soon as I got there and I started, you know, and I was by myself, you know, and I was hanging out with cats that was working in the hotel, and they took me back to their township, and they were like, hey, let's go through the ritual. We're gonna go through the ritual. And I'm like, oh, ritual. So I'm expecting like painted face and you know like you know I'm expecting to go all the way in, and what we pulled up at our house, and it was a bunch of young cats standing outside. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, this feels familiar, you know. And then, you know, we go in and we walk to the house, and then all the OGs, you know, I say from age like 50 to 70 was sitting in one section. And I'm like, that's what happens at my house on the weekends. So we keep going, and we go into the kitchen, and the women are in there cooking, and they talking, and they cooking all this food. And then you go out into the backyard, and there's some more young cats, you know what I'm saying, like my age, and they had just slaughtered a cow and a goat, and they were, you know, cooking the food, and they were passing around this real cool African beer, you know, and everybody was drinking from the same. It was like a exactly calabash. Everybody was drinking from that. They passing it back and forth, and I'm like, man, what ritual is this? And they was like, oh yeah, this you know, I can't remember the name. We've been doing this for thousands of years. And I was like, well, we do this same ritual back at home, and then for them it was a no-brainer. They were like, yeah, of course you do, because y'all African, you know. And I realized then, I was like, oh wow, yeah, right, because, you know, whatever this evil thing that happened to us, you know what I'm saying? Unfortunately, they don't teach us anything beyond that, you know. But what they did to us, it was no way they could wipe out what we were for thousands of years. You know what I'm saying? And it was right, something right there just made me completely whole. Like I was like, oh man, we've been African this whole time. When I stand outside, like when I hang with my family on the block in Oakland or Richmond, and all the youngsters stand outside, and my grandma's inside cooking. You know what I'm saying? And we being Africans, you know, and even though we were told it was being hood, or it was being something else, we was being true to what we've been for thousands and thousands of years. So I felt connected, you know, in a way that was very profound.
Give him a round of applause, please.
Okay. So, one, you kind of got to hear what I'm talking about when I say that, like that Oakland dialect, right? And then two, the conversation that he's having just around being true to yourself, and it's being phrased within the sense of being African, right? But it could be interpreted in many different ways. I think for the most part, everybody on this Zoom call could say that they exist within two worlds, right? Like this American world, and then wherever their home culture is from. And I think it's about understanding the value in your indigenous culture and the culture that you come from, right? And even though it may at times be in conflict with this American culture, it's not to devalue or to throw the cultural bomb on your own culture, right? It's to have a reverence and respect for that culture. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the video, thoughts on the readings, anything's on the table at this point.
I'm a little confused. So code switching for him speaking would be, because to me that sounds like an accent. So code switching for him would be not speaking in the accent? Or, I'm kind of confused on that.
Yeah. So he's not code switching. The whole point that I play this is because this is somebody who does not code switch, right? So if you think about it, like he's on a very professional platform right now. He's being interviewed about his movie, and he's speaking in the accent that is tied to Oakland, California, to the Bay Area. So he's not code switching. So the whole reason for you to listen to this is to hear somebody at the highest of professional settings not code switch. Does that make more sense for you, Miguel?
Yeah, but I was confused, because man, no, never mind. It's fine.
No. Let's unpack it, because you might not be the only one confused, for one, and two, I would hate for you to leave this confused when you could unpack it. So, is your confusion around the video itself and my reason for playing the video, or is it confusion around him identifying code switching? Where would you pinpoint the confusion?
It would be, so what I'm asking is, how would he speak if he was code switching? Would it be like how the other guy was speaking?
Yeah. So to put it a really blunt way to you, Miguel, like if he wasn't he wasn't code switching. So if he wasn't code switching, he would sound how he sounds now, right? If he were to code switch, would mean for him to sound more white.
All right, yeah, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah,
because I was kind of confused on that.
Yeah, so he's not code switching, and if he were to code switch, he would probably come on the interview sounding a little bit more like this, right? A little more white in his diction and his articulations.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Other thoughts, other comments, other questions, even.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask how you feel about non-Black people who grew up in diverse neighborhoods using Ebonics.
Yeah, actually, there's a very good movie out of Oakland called Blind Spotting, and they deal with that very spot on. It's very complex, Juan. It really is, because especially in an area like Oakland, right? Because it's very much a Oakland identity, right? And some may classify it as hip hop, some may classify it as acting Black. But this is something that's very specified to that Bay Area. Also, like in New York, you have the same phenomenon to where you have like Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, and Jamaicans, Black folks all mixed together, so they have the same experience, right? So they may all speak the same vernacular, right? So I think that's authentic, and that's who you are. So if that's who you are, then be your true self, right? That does not, in my opinion, give you the license to say nigga, right? That's not, you don't get that green pass. I don't believe in that shit, right? My rule of thumb when it comes to that, if you have never been called a nigger, then you cannot say nigga, right? So to me, that's where I would draw the line, because that's not even about your experience, right? That's, to me, is the appropriation, right? Black folks could turn that term that was designed to cause them pain, and they could morph that into a word that is meant for endearment, but they could do that because the word was meant to cause them pain, right? So to me, I have to draw the line there. But if that is part of your authentic experience, then that's who you are, and I'm not going to judge you for that. Give you an example. I had one of my best friends. His name is Miguel. He moved to California from New York. And coming from New York, he's Dominican and Puerto Rican. And you always nigga. And I'm like, yo, bro, I was about to fight him. Like, our first interaction was we about to chunk him for him saying that word, right? But as I got to know him more, I got to see like, okay, it's not what I thought it was, right? He grew up in a space to where that was accepted, right? Now, he had to stop saying that around me, of course, but it caused me to look at it in a more of a nuanced way, because that was his experience. That was his upbringing. So for me, I'm not going to chastise you. I'm not going to play you out for if you grew up in an environment where that's used, then you part of that environment, right? Not the N-word, but the Ebonics would have you, right? So I'm not going to knock you for that. But at the same time, Juan, there's also this phenomenon to where, so I'll give you another example. I worked at Apple before I started teaching, right? Apple prides itself in being multicultural, of being diverse. They hire a lot of young, hip folks, right? And what I would find at Apple while working there, a lot of things that the culture, a lot of things that Black folks would say on the block, right? These Apple workers who were non-Black would try to incorporate that into the professional setting. And for me, that kind of made me feel some kind of way, because if I were to do it, it would be viewed as unprofessional, right? But because it's coming from an alternate culture, then it becomes acceptable or even cool, right? And you see the same phenomenon with Black woman aesthetic, right? With Black woman beauty standards. So long pointed nails was deemed ghetto, right? Big hoop earrings was deemed ghetto when Black women did it. Braids was deemed ghetto when Black women did it. But as soon as a Kardashian does any of that, it's all good. It's fashionable, right? So to me, those are the kind of things where I have to draw the line because, to use your example, Juan, like those for the Kardashians, for example, right? That's not their culture. That's not their upbringing, right? They usurp that culture from those who are around them, and then they, because of their privilege, they're able to make that justified as fashionable. Does that answer your question? Did I go off on too much of a tangent?
No, yeah, you did. I agree with you. Thank you for answering.
Yeah, definitely. Other questions or comments? Give me two more before we call it a day. Let's get two more comments and we'll call it a day. It's a really good.
Mr. Oh, sorry. Um, like in the video, like he was saying that his experience of how he was going to like inside where people were talking and doing their traditions of African and talking in a different kind of language. Um, I think in my opinion from the video, I think what he was trying to say to the person that was interviewing him, he made it seem that like he did it like way like back to his home, like he knew like what he had to do in order to like talk to in order how to get his movie like big on the screen and make him like to bring in this tradition from to start new generations about like how well like African people would back in my like years before that, like it made me feel like kind of interested, like wow, like and they did that like that was like a whole generation like talking differently, but the way he was talking, it kind of surprised me because like I never heard like a person talk so much from their like not code switching, but like the way his like if he had an accent, like he would really automatically just switch up like automatically. That's my purpose of the video.
Yeah. Thank you, Destiny. Let's get one more to call it a day. Faith, why don't you close us out? What are your thoughts on either the video or anything mentioned today at all? Faith, we're waiting on you.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, I'm just asking you to close us out. Just give us a comment on either the video, the readings, anything that was discussed today.
I didn't really get the reading, but when we watched the video, it helped me get more about like changing like how you're talking, like in the dialect.
Okay. So let me ask you this then. If you didn't get the readings, what questions could you pose to the class about the reading to help you understand it a little bit better?
What do you mean?
Okay. So you said you didn't understand the reading, correct? So if you didn't understand the reading, that should prompt some questions for you that, if were answered, would allow you to understand the reading a little bit more. So what questions could you think of, or what question did you write in your journal that you could pose to the class to help you understand the reading more?
Um, I don't really know.
Okay, so what didn't you understand about the reading?
What we were talking about at the beginning. Um, oh, I forgot the word. Uh,
The code switch, the cultural bomb.
yeah, that part. I didn't really get
Which one?
how like
I said two things. So which one?
where how you were changing, how you were talking.
Code switching.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, do you have a job, Faith?
Huh?
Do you have a job? Do you work?
No, but I have.
Okay. So when you were working, did you have a professional voice?
Yeah, when people would come in, I would have to talk different, not how I would talk with my friend.
So that's the code switch. So
Yeah, I get it now.
okay, so that's when I say code switching, that's what I mean. So you're gonna put on a professional voice, right? And implicitly what that signifies is how you talk with your friends has very little value. You feel it has very little value in professional settings. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, the class, this, and we'll close it off. Um, y'all been with me long enough to know that I don't code switch, right? Does my inability to code switch devalue my ability to be your professor? So does the way I talk to y'all, right? Does that make me seem less credible as your professor?
Not at all.
Right.
No.
So the point being then is it's not always necessary to talk right to be considered professional, to be considered intelligent, or can be considered able to do your job, right? That's the bigger overall picture. And that's the reason why I talk to y'all the way that I do, so you can understand implicitly that you don't have to code switch to find success in this world. You could be yourself, and being yourself is enough, right? So let's